If you really want to change the way you think about your life, you have to start with one simple truth. Most of what we believe about happiness and success is built on assumptions we've never questioned. We grow up being told that if we achieve enough, earn enough, accumulate enough, then we'll be happy. We're conditioned to chase external markers of worth. And when we finally reach them, we often feel an unsettling emptiness that we don't talk about. That's not a flaw in you. That's a flaw in the story you were told. And the most powerful proof of that comes from one of the most extraordinary research projects in human history. Over 80 years ago, in the late 1930s, a group of researchers at Harvard University launched a study with a simple but profound question: what makes a good life? They began tracking two groups of young men, one from Harvard's sophomore class, the other from some of the most underprivileged neighborhoods in Boston. These participants came from wildly different worlds, some destined for privilege and influence, others facing hardship and struggle. Yet the researchers followed them closely, year after year, decade after decade, collecting data on their health, careers, relationships, mental states, and personal choices. And here's the astonishing part: that study is still ongoing today, now including the children and grandchildren of the original participants. It's the longest continuous study on human happiness ever conducted. Now, why does this matter? Because the insights that emerge from this study don't just challenge what we think we know, they dismantle it. The researchers watched participants become doctors, lawyers, factory workers, CEOs. They watched them marry, divorce, build fortunes, lose everything, fall ill, recover, grow old, and die. And as they sifted through the mountain of data collected over a lifetime, one conclusion rose above everything else with crystal clarity: the single greatest predictor of happiness, health, and fulfillment wasn't wealth, wasn't fame, wasn't career success. It was the quality of their relationships. That sounds almost too simple, doesn't it? But that's the power of this study. It strips away the illusions and reveals what actually matters over the arc of a lifetime. People who were surrounded by strong, supportive relationships with family, friends, partners, and communities were not only happier, they were physically healthier. Their minds stayed sharper longer, they lived longer, they faced challenges with more resilience. Meanwhile, those who lacked meaningful relationships, no matter how much money or prestige they accumulated, were far more likely to suffer from illness, depression, cognitive decline, and regret. Think about the weight of that. Decades of human lives studied, and the verdict is not a theory, it's evidence. It tells us that connection isn't just a nice to have, it's a fundamental human need. And when we neglect it, we pay a price. That means the ladder we're all taught to climb, the one built on status, accumulation, and achievement, might be leaning against the wrong wall. The very thing we believe will secure our happiness might be the thing distracting us from it. And here's something even deeper. The study revealed that it's not the number of relationships that matters, but their depth. A life filled with acquaintances can still feel lonely, but a few relationships built on trust, vulnerability, and authenticity can anchor you in ways nothing else can. That's why some participants who had modest careers and never amassed wealth ended up reporting far greater satisfaction than those who achieved traditional success but neglected their connections. So ask yourself honestly, how much of your time and energy is invested in chasing things that the data shows don't lead to fulfillment? And how much is invested in nurturing the relationships that actually do? That's the real challenge this research puts before us. It's not just about knowing the truth. It's about having the courage to live by it. Because in the end, this study doesn't just reveal what makes a good life. It invites you to rewrite your definition of one. And once you see the evidence this clearly, you can't unsee it. You can only decide what you're going to do about it. We live in a world that has conditioned us to chase illusions. From the moment we're old enough to dream, we're told that happiness lies on the other side of achievement, that if we just work hard enough, climb high enough, and accumulate enough, we'll finally feel complete. We're taught to measure life by the size of our bank accounts, the prestige of our titles, the number of people who know our name. And yet, when people actually reach those summits, many of them report a quiet, persistent truth: it isn't enough. The very things they thought would fill them often leave them feeling strangely hollow. That's not because success is meaningless. Achievement, wealth, recognition, these things do matter. But they're not the destination we think they are. The Harvard study we talked about earlier, the one that tracked lives over the course of decades, revealed something that flies directly in the face of our cultural narrative. Over and over again, researchers found that people who devoted their lives to chasing wealth or status often ended up less happy, less healthy, and less fulfilled than those who focused on building meaningful relationships and living with purpose. And this wasn't a subtle difference, it was stark. People who hit the external markers of success but neglected their internal world often found themselves isolated and dissatisfied, wondering why they still felt incomplete despite having it all. Here's why: external success is a means, not an end. It's a tool. Money can create opportunities. Achievement can open doors. Recognition can amplify your voice. But none of those things by themselves can give you a life that feels rich and meaningful. Because at our core, we are not designed to be fulfilled by possessions or praise. We are wired for connection, growth, and contribution. The science is unambiguous about this. People who believe that happiness is something they'll earn, once they cross some external threshold, a certain income, a certain position, a certain level of fame, almost always find that the finish line moves the moment they reach it. The satisfaction fades quickly, and they're left chasing the next milestone. That's why we see countless stories of people who are wildly successful by society's standards yet struggle with emptiness, anxiety, or depression. But those who center their lives on relationships, purpose, and contribution experience something very different. They still pursue goals, but they understand that the goal is not the trophy. It's who they become in the process and how they connect with others along the way. They build lives anchored in meaning rather than performance. They value depth over display. And because of that, their success feels deeply satisfying instead of fleeting. It's not that we should stop striving. Far from it. Ambition is a beautiful thing when it's aligned with what truly matters. The danger lies in believing that success alone will make us whole. The research shows us that success without connection feels empty, but connection without success can still feel rich. That's a crucial distinction. It means that instead of asking, how can I achieve more? We should be asking, how can I live more meaningfully? It means redefining success not just as what we get, but as what we give, how we grow, and who we become. And this shift isn't just philosophical. It's profoundly practical. People who prioritize relationships and purpose don't just feel better emotionally, they're more resilient in the face of setbacks. They recover from stress more quickly. They live longer. Their lives have a depth and texture that achievement alone can't provide. That's why some of the happiest, most fulfilled people on earth are not the ones with the biggest bank accounts or the most followers. They're the ones whose lives are rich in love, meaning, and contribution. So the question you have to wrestle with is this: have you built your life around what looks valuable or what is valuable? Are you chasing success that fades or investing in meaning that endures? Because once you see the truth, once you understand that success without connection is an illusion, you can never go back to living unconsciously. If you think relationships are just about emotional comfort or companionship, think again. The data from this extraordinary study shows us something far deeper and more profound. Connection is not just a psychological luxury. It is a biological necessity. It doesn't just shape how happy we feel. It literally shapes how long we live, how healthy we remain, and how well our minds function as we age. This is where science and the human spirit intersect. Because when we talk about connection, we're not just talking about warm feelings. We're talking about the wiring of life itself. One of the most striking findings of the Harvard study was the direct, measurable link between the quality of someone's relationships and their physical health decades later. Participants who reported strong, supportive relationships in midlife were far more likely to reach old age in good health, with lower rates of chronic disease, better immune function, and sharper cognitive abilities. And this wasn't about genetics or wealth or luck. It was about the human need to belong and to be deeply known. Those who were isolated, even if they were financially secure and outwardly successful, were far more likely to suffer from cardiovascular disease, memory decline, and early death. Why does this happen? Because human connection is woven into the very structure of our biology. Our nervous systems, our hormones, even our immune responses are shaped by the quality of our relationships. Chronic loneliness, not just being alone, but feeling disconnected, has been shown to increase levels of cortisol, the body's stress hormone. Over time, that chronic stress inflames our systems, damages our blood vessels, weakens our hearts, and accelerates aging. It's as harmful as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. On the flip side, supportive relationships buffer the stress response. They regulate our nervous system, lower inflammation, boost resilience, and strengthen our body's capacity to heal. This isn't some poetic metaphor, it's hard science. Your body is literally listening to the state of your relationships. And that means every moment of kindness, every meaningful conversation, every act of forgiveness and understanding isn't just good for your soul. It's medicine for your body. And it's not just physical health that thrives in connection. Your mind depends on it too. The study found that people with strong relationships maintained sharper memories and better cognitive function well into old age. Their minds stayed flexible and engaged, while those who were socially isolated experienced faster cognitive decline. Think about that. The conversations you have today, the relationships you nurture, could be shaping the strength of your brain decades from now. It's not just about living longer. It's about living better. This challenges a deeply ingrained cultural narrative that tells us self-reliance is the highest virtue. Yes, independence is important, but we were never meant to do life alone. Human beings are social creatures. We evolved in tribes, survived through cooperation, and thrived through connection. Our biology still reflects that truth. When we isolate ourselves, whether through overwork, ambition, or emotional withdrawal, we cut ourselves off from one of the most powerful forces for health and longevity available to us. The implication is life-changing. Nurturing relationships isn't a secondary task to squeeze in when everything else is done. It's a foundational priority. It means putting time and energy into the people who matter most. It means being present, listening deeply, resolving conflicts, and choosing vulnerability over self-protection. These aren't soft, optional choices. They are acts of self-preservation, as vital as nutrition, exercise, or sleep. And maybe most importantly, it means rethinking what strength really is. True strength isn't about how well you stand alone. It's about how deeply you're willing to connect. It's about building a life woven with bonds that nourish you, challenge you, and sustain you through every season. The evidence is undeniable, and the message is simple. If you want to live longer, think sharper, and feel more alive, invest in the people you love. Your health, your mind, and your very life depend on it. Knowing the truth and living the truth are two entirely different things. Most people hear research like this, that relationships and purpose are what truly sustain a meaningful life, and they nod their heads, they agree with it intellectually. But then Monday morning comes, and they go right back to the same routines, the same habits, the same priorities that keep them trapped in a cycle of chasing what doesn't matter. Information changes nothing until it's applied, and the real challenge this study presents isn't just to understand what matters, it's to restructure your life around it. That starts with one simple but uncomfortable question: if connection, purpose, and meaning are the foundations of a good life, does the way I'm living today reflect that truth? For most people, the honest answer is no. We say relationships are important, but we sacrifice them for work. We say health matters, but we neglect the people and activities that keep us healthy. We talk about purpose, but we fill our days with distractions that numb us instead of fulfill us. This is the human paradox. We know what matters most, and yet we often give it the least of our time and energy. So how do we change that? It begins by flipping the script. Instead of organizing your life around achievement and trying to fit in relationships and purpose where you start with what truly matters and build everything else around it. That means putting people first, not as an afterthought, but as a guiding principle. It means carving out time consistently and intentionally to nurture the relationships that matter most. It means having the hard conversations, showing up fully, choosing presence over distraction. Because love, connection, and trust don't grow by accident. They grow through deliberate investment. It also means rethinking how you define success. If you want to live in alignment with what the research shows, you have to stop measuring your life by external metrics alone. Start asking different questions. Am I growing? Am I contributing? Am I connected? These are the questions that lead to a life that feels full, not just looks full. And when you build your days around these priorities, something extraordinary happens. Your achievements don't become smaller, they become more meaningful. Success stops being an end in itself and becomes a vehicle for deeper connection and greater impact. And then there's purpose, the thread that weaves meaning through everything we do. Purpose doesn't have to mean solving global problems or building empires. It simply means living in a way that's aligned with your values and directed toward something bigger than yourself. It's about asking, who am I serving? How am I contributing? What legacy am I creating through my choices today? Purpose turns ordinary moments into profound ones, and it's often through our relationships that we discover it. Because the truth is, our deepest sense of meaning almost always comes from the ways we touch other lives. Here's the most empowering part: none of this requires a radical external change. You don't have to quit your job, move across the world, or start over completely. Redesigning your life around what truly matters is less about changing your circumstances and more about changing your priorities. It's about shifting your focus from accumulation to connection, from performance to presence, from self-centered striving to shared meaning. It's a daily practice, a choice you make in how you spend your time, how you show up for the people around you, and how you define what success really means. And once you make that shift, the entire texture of your life changes. The noise quiets down, the endless striving softens. What remains is something deeper, a life that feels whole, not because it's perfect, but because it's grounded in what's real. This research doesn't just give us information, it gives us a mirror. It asks us to look at the way we're living and decide whether it reflects what we truly value. And in that reflection lies our greatest opportunity. Not just to think differently about life, but to live differently from this moment forward.